Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A big episode in store for you. IREN reporting earnings after the close tonight. We've also got news out from Cipher, WhiteFiber, and Soluna Holdings that we wanted to discuss. Unfortunately, a fairly dismal day in terms of miner and Bitcoin performance. All of that and more in today's episode. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony absolutely loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know how you're feeling about the sector today and if you're making any purchases. With that being said, let's get into today's video. Okay guys, away we go. Thursday afternoon, not the best looking day in the markets. We're going to be taking a look at Bitcoin price, Bitcoin miner price, some of the latest news, and teeing up our expectations for IREN earnings, which come out after the bell tonight. There's been some contention on social media talking about, I guess, Patrick Fleury's stance on ERCOT and some of the backlog in that grid. We're looking forward to hosting Dan from IREN talking about maybe his side of that story. So we'll get into all of that and more. First things first here, Anthony, Bitcoin itself giving us some trouble today, back in the 101 range.
Yeah, we can see from that 5 days, towards the end of last week, start of this week, we're in that $110,000 range. Now we're hovering around the $100,000 range. We've only been in that range a couple of times in the last 6 months. We've really been keeping a gap over that $100,000 range. So, not too much negative news out about Bitcoin at the moment. It might be just some of the macroeconomic news that's impacting the markets and impacting other metrics out there. And Bitcoin, is just, it's another metric that will, at some point correlate to some of these changes as well. So, Bitcoin's down today, and as we talked about the decoupling maybe of miners, the miners appear to be coupled with Bitcoin today because they're also significantly down. And surprisingly, if we look at the companies that are down the most at the moment, you've got some of the big hitters down there. We've got Canaan and Saluna. Obviously, we've discussed Canaan last night. We'll discuss Saluna more in the podcast today. But Cipher and IREN, some of the big hitters there in terms of delivering these big contracts this week with Microsoft and AWS. They're having a bit of a red day today, and I think there was an expectation that these two miners might actually sort of do quite well, because we've got the earnings of IREN coming out at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and there's expectation that there'll be good earnings. Maybe there's some good news in there, although they did deliver a great update on Monday morning, effectively stealing the show from Cipher. But Cipher came out all guns blazing with their second contract, which will take over the Black Pearl site. But today, having a bit of red day, both double digits down, 10 and 11% respectively. And you can see from the day range, a lot of these mining stocks are at their lowest at the moment. So they were significantly higher in earlier markets, in pre-markets, but we've seen this big pullback today, and it's affected everyone. Everything's red at the moment in terms of the mining stocks there. Bitcoin's down as well, so it's a full impact today. Looking at the heat map, Bryce, what are you seeing from the heat map at the moment?
A lot of red, unfortunately, and there's some concerns right now. Obviously, AI, CapEx spend really supporting the market. We've talked about whether or not we feel this is a bubble. Obviously, you and I don't, but the concerns about circular revenue, companies backstopped by other companies they're invested in, the CapEx requirements. We've looked at some of these in terms of 45 gigawatts, some of the requirements for the data, the energy, and the amount of money it takes to finance these projects. As Patrick said, the demand may be limitless, but the CapEx pool is not. So potentially a little bit of a breather, as you say, on the heat map, starting to look a lot more red. We even have a few of the miners in the red territory year to date now.
We do, and but this heat map sort of changes very regularly. I mean, we're looking at those big drops today from Iron and Cipher, but go to the 5-day change, and they're actually significantly positive. 19% for Iron, 15% for Cipher. Go to the year to date and 1 year change; they're massively up in the year to date 1 year change. And if you go down that year to date change, it really is those companies that have already sort of like set their stall out in terms of directing the power towards high performance compute in the future, and have a strategy and have delivered some of the contracts or signed contracts. They're the ones that have really had a great year so far. Now, we talk about volatility a lot, Bryce. This isn't the space for the faint-hearted. I mean, Bitcoin's down, a couple of percent today, but the mining stocks averaging probably 7 or 8% down. This is not unusual. We see this. I've seen this over the last 5 or 6 years since I've been in the space. You've been exactly the same as well. That it's great when we see the days going up, and I speak to a lot of investors about when they should be thinking about taking profits, and I've let people know when I've taken profits. I have we have a private channel that we share our trades with, and we've been doing that with great regularity this year. I say to people that when the stocks go down, they go down fairly quicker than when they go up. So you've got to really time things right. I mean, I don't want to paint a doom picture here, but stocks can change really quickly. And I know there's a lot of people out there that were thinking, that I've made some nice profits out of some of these companies. Should I be taking some profits? I've certainly taken profits. I know you've taken profits, and you've still got some capital in the game there to hopefully see some of these stocks go even further. So, as I say, be very careful. It's a very volatile space.
Yeah, we say stocks take the stairs up and the elevator down, and we talk about that volatility. It can happen so quickly. We've seen that in previous cycles. Now, talking about earnings, a tough day in terms of timing for IREN coming out with their earnings after the bell. We've talked about some of these big red moves in the miners themselves. WhiteFiber has also announced their Q3 results. They're going to be coming out on the 13th next week. So we look forward to hosting Sam Tabar, getting an update there, obviously involved in the AI HPC space as well. Now, speaking of earnings, Salman Khan, he was on yesterday, CFO of Mara, a very interesting interview. If you guys haven't got a chance, we put that one out this morning. Definitely some insights, I guess, nuggets into Mara's growth strategy, really looking at that global expansion and growth. So that was a great conversation, great context in terms of the strategy.
Yeah, and one thing I picked up on was I sort of tried to put the question across to Salman about, as two accountants would look at the buying of GPUs, and the risks associated with that type of strategy of doing your own CSP strategy yourself. He came out and gave his view on that there. So if you haven't seen the podcast, I suggest, you spend, 30, 40 minutes, go through the podcast there. We got quite a few questions through to him there, and he gave some really good answers in terms of, the earnings themselves, which was predominantly on the podcast for, but also giving a view of what Mara's doing in the space and what they're doing differently from say some of the other peer miners. And they are following some different strategies out there. I'll let you judge as to how you see that. But if you haven't managed to watch it yet, it's well worth a listen. And we also, if you don't want to watch it on YouTube, all the podcasts are available on 15 or 16 different formats, including the likes of Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube Music. And so, you can go and download those podcasts there. They're doing really well. We can obviously see great numbers for the YouTube videos, but we're seeing even bigger numbers in terms of the rise in numbers from the podcasts themselves. So if you're not able to sort of sit down and watch them at home, and you're driving from home and it's a half-an-hour journey, then perfect time to listen to one or two of the podcasts there. And yes, you don't get the graphics, but you get a sense of what's happening, because the conversation is stimulating between some of these CFOs and CEOs that we've had on the channel over the last few weeks. Really worth your time.
Yeah, it certainly is. And since we're giving a plug to the audio podcast, if you are listening, give us a 5-star rating. That helps get us up in the algorithm and maybe out to new subscribers or potential listeners. Now, I'll throw you in the hot seat here. We'll switch the script up a bit. You just mentioned the CFO of Mara's comments on the CSP versus colocation model. We know your thoughts on the risk and associated risk of the two models. We also had Patrick Fleury, another very well-respected CFO in the space. He came on, he talked about not only the differences in models, but also the differences in these power jurisdictions in the United States, talking about the Southern Power Pool compared to ERCOT, or maybe PJM up in Bitfarms' neck of the woods. So I wanted to get your thoughts there. I mentioned in the intro, this sparked a little bit of contention on social media as well. Obviously, people or retail investors in these companies have strong allegiances to each company, but probably worth a question or two to Dan Roberts in terms of how does this backlog work and what level of security do they have on this power in future years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm from the UK. Things I've learned about Texas in terms of power, it's the only state that has its own power. In terms of it delivers itself, it's not part of the national grid in terms of the rest of the states. It delivers its own power. We've seen an increase in sort of activity in Texas through the Bitcoin mining phases. Now we're seeing that increased activity move towards high performance compute. We know that Texas itself has had its challenges in recent years, especially when the weather turns and demand is high. And we're hearing, obviously, during those periods of time, miners switch off. And so, even if you just take a step back and think about the power available, there's obviously times when, people have to curtail, even at the moment now. So the grid doesn't, function so that everything can be happening all at once. Bitcoin miners are really good at balancing the grid. So when demand is high, they just switch off, and when it reduces, they can switch back on again. But what it's saying to me is there doesn't appear to be sufficient grid time for everything to be switched on at once. Now, we're seeing some of these companies announce really, really big deals that are not going to be energized this year, but maybe 26, 27, 28 in the future years there. And that's, perfectly all right, because these facilities will take 12 months, 2 years, 3 years to build. So you want the power to be effectively arriving at the same time the buildings are being built, so you've got everything working in conjunction with each other. I don't know enough about the balance of what is out there at the moment, and what availability to increase that power, and what the line of power, this 200 megawatts, 200 gigawatts of power is really like, in the sort of like in the queue to be switched on. But one thing I will say is Patrick Fleury is somebody that everyone in the industry respects. He's been in this sector for 25 years, in the power sector itself. I haven't got an ounce of the same level of competence in terms of that industry that he has there. And I guarantee the vast majority of people in social media land haven't got that same level there. Maybe the likes of, if you remember Blonity was an expert in the power field. He worked in the power industry in Germany. So I would take certainly what he knew as there. And there are other people in the space also that have and a sense of understanding there. But I'm not one of these people. I learn from Patrick. I'm going to learn next week when I'm in Texas, talking at some of the sites with some of the site managers as to what the issues will be as we go forward over the next few years, and maybe get an understanding more there. But we saw this tweet today from Franz Backer, and Franz has done a lot of updates on IREN, a lot of due diligence, a lot of analysis, and helps a lot of people. Certainly this last sort of 18 months, with a lot of the other people coming into the space and doing that. And he seems to think that, Patrick may be, over sort of selling overselling it really, and the fact that, certain companies, I mean, maybe like IREN will be fine in terms of their sites being energized there. And was really trying to get a comment from Tyler Page, the CFO of Cipher. But Tyler's one of these, he's been in the space long enough to understand, again, who the people out there with the knowledge, and he agrees that Patrick's talented and has a lot of respect for the Wulf team. So, but from Tyler's perspective, they've delivered two contracts with two sites that are already energized. You know, so if we were to ask Tyler about all those sites that aren't energized yet and how they would form in the queue, maybe we get a different answer. I don't know, but he's got two sites, two contracts, and 600 megawatts already energized. He's in a sort of like a really good position at the moment. So we're seeing a lot of this, and this is just an example. I wanted to put an example there just to show you that we are seeing this there. And the great thing is, it's causing a discussion. So, we want that discussion out there. We don't know, Bryce, and Franz doesn't know. And Tyler might not be, 100% aware of everything, and Patrick themselves, but it's having that discussion. These people are in the space, so I'm not going to say, don't listen to them. I mean, Patrick's a very talented. He's been in the power space for a long, long time. He was working in the power space, and that's how he got to have that relationship with TeraWulf, and then eventually came into the TeraWulf team as the CFO, and he's been delivering ever since he arrived. Then, if you see where. When I started following TeraWulf and buying their shares at 50 cents a share, it's a whole different ballgame from where they are today, having landed 4 contracts in the HPC space.
Yeah, certainly right there. And the nice thing here, you and I may not have all the answers, but we have direct access to the CEOs who do have the answers. So we have the benefit of talking to Tyler, to Dan, to the team at TeraWulf, and we'll be asking Dan Roberts those same questions next week. How secure is that power at Sweetwater? Maybe out into 2027, 2028, maybe put some of those concerns to bed. You just mentioned Tyler Page doesn't have any concerns about their power pipeline. He's moving forward with the financing now for Barber Lake as well. We talked about the proposed note yesterday. They now came out with some of the terms. $1.4 billion. Again, access to capital does not seem to be a problem when you have this hyperscaler contract.
No, it doesn't. And the doors seem to be opening really quickly. And we're seeing quite a lot of these updates now. As soon as a contract's been signed, that the funding seems to be coming through, literally days afterwards. And this is no different from that 1.4 billion offering. 7.125% is the percentage rate, and that be paid annually up until 2030 when the notes are due. So in my quick head of calculation, I think you also in your head calculate it round about $100 million a year in interest. Not to be sniffed at. That's a significant amount of interest payments to make there, and so Tyler will be hoping to get some of these contracts up and running really, really quickly to start bringing that revenue in to cover that cost, because 100 million a year is around about just over 8 million a month. And that's a significant amount in terms of how much Bitcoin you'd have to mine to deliver that. Even at today's price now, you'd need to mine 80 Bitcoin just to cover the interest payments. But that's what you've got to do. You're going into these deals. These are big, big deals. I mean, Cipher have already got something like $8.5 billion in deals. They've raised this money now. They're going to be paying the interest point in that. But once the revenues start coming through, you'll start seeing that net operating income around about the 85%, which they've quoted in their updates there. That will give them sort of like the cushion factor to cover those payments and bring in a nice margin at the same time.
Certainly will, yeah. So continuing to progress at Cipher, and we'll keep a close eye on that one. Now, another company we're watching in the sector very closely, Soluna. They've come out with a double header as well. Their monthly production update, we can get into that, and some exciting project updates. Now, we're going to be down there on site with John and team next week. Looking very forward to seeing the site in person or real life, but you can see Dorothy 2 Phase 3 is now completed. Kadi 2 AI development begins, and they've expanded their board. They're working on multiple projects at once. As John likes to say, they keep pushing, and really a solid stream of news throughout 2025.
Yeah, we've seen update after update all through the year. And I remember going back to one of our early podcasts with John, and we shown some of the pictures of the sites there. And I said, "Oh, those renderings look really good." And he said, "Renderings?" He says, "That's the real pictures." I went, "Really? They look like They look really sort of like renderings of something like very high tech and futuristic, but those are actual sites. So it's going to be great to be going down to Dorothy 2 and seeing some of those buildings that we've shown in the pictures many times on the podcast and get a first-hand view of what they look when you're close up to them. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to meeting the team. John is a great communicator in the space there, and we'll get some of his wisdom on Monday as well when we visit the site. So looking forward to that there. They've had some big updates today. I'll start with the Bitcoin mining, Bryce, and maybe you can cover some of the other projects updates to get through on this one here. But in terms of their mining, we saw some positivity straight away. So in the October, Bitcoin mined actually increased by 6%. Bear in mind, we've got a difficulty occurring there. So 9.2 Bitcoin mined as opposed to 8.7 Bitcoin mined in August 2025. Remember, Bitcoin mining, self-mining isn't their biggest part of the business. They're focused more on delivering the hosted business there. We'll come on to that as well now. So total operational hash rate for self-mining, 737 petahash. That's an increase of 12%. That tells you why they raised more Bitcoin in a month. And when you think about difficulty was affecting the miners probably by about 5 or 6%, you can then see how that difference there, Bitcoin miners increased by 6%, but the hash rate to achieve that 6% was actually 12% higher. The remaining 6% is the difficulty impact, and that's what we talk about regularly on the show. You know, this difficulty impact is far bigger problem to them than the actual halving is, because that's happening every 2 weeks. And so, you know, we're seeing an influx of the global hash rate continuing to increase, even though miners in the US are being squeezed. And you'd like to think that some of the miners in the US have got some of the lowest rates of power, but it seems it's an issue at the moment. In terms of efficiency, 26. We want to see that number come down. That's probably like mid-range at the moment. I'd turn around and say in terms of global fleet efficiency, anything sort of 20 or below 20, I'd say is probably higher in the top tier in terms of efficiency. Now, Saluna do sell their Bitcoin to pay for their operations on a monthly basis, so they don't hodl anything there. And in terms of Bitcoin mined per exahash, 12.5 in October and 13.2 in September. That sits fairly well with their peer miners there. So again, providing not just a good level of Bitcoin for the amount of petahash that they've got, but also mining at a good amount that they should be mining for that hash rate. So they're not having to curtail as much as other miners. So maybe some of the weather conditions are more suitable now, where they're not having to curtail as much. That sounds like it looks like that from the update there. But that's the self-mining. If there's anything on the project side, Bryce, you can update us on that.
Yeah, they're very good at transparency here. They give a good update on each and every one. A couple highlights that stood out for me. We just featured Canaan on the podcast yesterday. They've obviously got a hosting agreement with Saluna as well, 20 megawatts at their D1A or Dorothy 1A site. So that's their 25 megawatt hosting facility. Some good updates on Dorothy 2 as well. Substantial completion of phase 3 construction achieved, which we talked about in the intro there, and working on some PPAs for their future sites as well. So looking out into the future, they've got Annie, Gladys, Rosa, and Faye. There's no shortage of work here. We're going to have to talk to John about how he keeps all these projects straight, but looking very forward to the opportunity. And again, definitely one to keep an eye on. You talk about market cap, share price in comparison to power pipeline. Soluna definitely punching above its weight, as we like to say.
It certainly is, Bryce. And one thing I'll add at the end of that, which I overlooked, is really you talked about these new clients, hosted clients. You can see the hosted hash rate increase now to 3.4 exahash, up from 2.95. That's been increasing over the last few months now, and you can see these new clients, and that's going to get bigger because, in terms of next year, you're going to see Galaxy's fleet start to arrive at Saluna's sites, and they're going to be installed and delivering, more hash rate there. So that keep a watch out for the hosted hash rate. That seems to be the strategy at the moment in terms of the mining side. And also at the same time, we know that Saluna are fully focused on delivering HPC. And as we start ramping out these projects, remember, you just articulated there's 2 projects on the go at the moment. Dorothy projects is still on the go, and Catty's already started. So this is something they haven't been able to do before, but because of the amount of updates this year, because of their funding or their ability to attract funding this year, and because of the share price has actually helped in this year. The share price has done really well in terms of where it was probably 8 or 9 months ago, where it was in a challenging position there. They were having to sort of like consider options to stay within the Nasdaq, but now that seems to be behind them. They've got a reasonable share price there, a reasonable market capitalization. It gives them more independence and more levers in terms of raising capital. So having two projects on the go at the moment, I'm sure we'll start seeing maybe potentially more of these developed projects starting to occur, maybe slightly quicker than before, because things are starting to happen for Saluna. We'll get more of an update next week, and we'll make sure we give you guys the update as soon as we receive it.
Yeah, looking really forward to that one. Now, the final piece of rumor or hearsay we wanted to talk about today, a cryptic photo from our friend Matt Schultz. It appears to be at an NVIDIA office or headquarters, potentially hinting at the AI HPC transformation. We'll leave that one up to your guys' imagination. Time will tell, but we know these companies alongside Mara, as we heard this morning or last night from Salman Khan, looking to get involved in this vertical.
Yeah, and it's good that CleanSpark finally made that decision to start pivoting some of their power towards HPC. It was leaving shareholders scratching their heads as they were literally the last of the pure play miners. Even Mara had started to sort of like develop their strategy by buying the likes of a stake in Exaion from EDF. But CleanSpark have made that move. They've purchased that site in Texas, and they've got the whole team there, or the senior team there. Looks like is at an NVIDIA site there, and it looks like they're not going until they get some NVIDIA GPUs by the looks of the faces. So let's see what comes out from them soon. But yeah, it's a good pivot towards there, and they've got a lot of power and a lot of experience. Maybe they can sort of like catch up some of their peer miners and start delivering this, as quickly as they do.
I gotta say, those live wall logos are pretty fancy there, Anthony, with all the flora and fauna on the wall. I might have to start planting some grass behind me here, but we'll leave that for another day, you guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back here tomorrow. We've got our power play, Asher Janut, CEO of Hut 8, and of course, our regular podcast update. So a full agenda heading into the weekend, and then of course, our big Texas tour next week. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.